At first light, a modern forest looks convincing. Mist hangs between trunks. Birds move in the upper branches. Ferns hold the night's water. From a distance, it has the shape of something ancient, something complete. But step inside and the illusion begins to fail. The trunks are narrow. The canopy is shallow. Light reaches the ground too easily. The floor is clean in the wrong way, interrupted by paths, cut lines, drainage scars, tire width gaps now softened by moss. You are standing in a place everyone calls a forest, and yet it feels strangely temporary, like a sketch of one. A rehearsal. A reduced copy. So the question arrives almost by itself. If this is a true forest, why does it look so small? The official explanation is simple, and at first it seems sufficient. Forests are dynamic ecosystems. They burn, flood, collapse, and return. Human beings cut them down, and in some places they grow back. Ecologists distinguish between primary forest, secondary forest, managed woodland, scrub, savanna, and plantation, but public language collapses these differences into one convenient word: forest. We are told that Earth is still heavily forested, that trees cover immense areas, and that today's wooded landscapes are merely the latest chapter in a long biological cycle. Deep time adds comfort to that story. Ancient forests existed. Many vanished. Others evolved. The green cover remained. The label survived. But the label is doing more work than most people realize. Because the moment you look closely at what institutions actually count, protect, map, and celebrate, the official explanation begins to thin out. There is a legal forest, an economic forest, a satellite forest, and a lived forest, and these are not the same thing. There are places that qualify as forest because tree cover reaches a minimum threshold. Even if the structure is simplified, the species mix is artificial, and the ecological memory is broken. There are plantations counted beside old growth. There are young regrowth stands spoken of in the same breath as ancient woodland. There are maps shaded green that conceal a harsher fact: tree presence is not forest fullness. The record shows a category so broad that it can hide loss inside the appearance of recovery. And that is where the hidden theory enters, not as a rant, and not as fantasy, but as an investigative possibility. What if there are almost no true forests left in the sense earlier ages would have understood them? What if what most modern people call forest is, in structural terms, regrowth, brush, managed timber, juvenile canopy, or ecological residue, bushes wearing the name of a vanished architecture? Not because trees do not exist. They do. Not because forests never existed. They did. But because the original scale, density, age, and complexity of arboreal worlds may have been destroyed so thoroughly, and so long ago in many regions, that language stayed behind after the reality was stripped out. The word remained. The cathedral did not. Consider the definition problem first, because it sounds technical until you realize how much it changes perception. In major international reporting systems, an area can qualify as forest with surprisingly modest canopy cover, modest height, and modest continuity, provided the trees are expected to reach certain thresholds. That means a young stand, a recovering stand, or even a commercial tree plantation can sit under the same broad umbrella as an ancient, self-organizing ecosystem layered over centuries. On paper, this stabilizes measurement. In reality, it blurs meaning. A dense plantation of one commercial species may increase forest statistics while reducing ecological complexity. A logged landscape may regain tree cover while losing old soil relationships, deadwood cycles, fungal webs, hydrology, and vertical stratification. There is a bureaucratic victory in that language. There is also a biological disappearance. To be fair, the mainstream view is not foolish. Forests do regenerate. Secondary forests matter. Young woodland stores carbon, protects watersheds, and provides habitat. Pollen records, tree rings, peat deposits, and historical accounts all show that wooded land can return after disturbance. The official explanation is not false. It is incomplete, because what it often fails to say with enough force is that regrowth is not equivalence. 100 years of trees is not 1,000 years of forest. A closed canopy is not a recreated interior world. A green satellite image is not proof of recovered depth. The gaps are structural, not sentimental. Old forests build complexity slowly and unevenly, across time spans that exceed policy cycles, corporate rotations, and even national memory. Once that continuity is broken, the replacement may look alive while remaining fundamentally reduced. Then the scale of the older world begins to matter. Paleobotany does not support the comforting idea that forests have always looked roughly as they do now. The deep past was stranger. Earlier forest systems were built by organisms modern people would barely recognize as trees, and some of them reached imposing size. The coal swamps of the Carboniferous were not quaint versions of present woodland. They were vast, wet, oxygen-rich systems crowded with giant club moss relatives, horsetail relatives, fern forests, and dense plant mass that later became coal measures beneath entire regions. Some arborescent lycopsids reached heights compared with modern tall trees, yet they were structurally unlike the forests most people imagine. The official explanation treats this as evolutionary background. But there is a sharper implication. The arboreal worlds of Earth have not simply changed, they have collapsed, transformed, and narrowed. The stone remembers. The coal seam remembers. The language does not. Now widen the frame. The pattern repeats across continents and climates. In region after region, the surviving forests most people can access are fragmented, younger, narrower, or more managed than the name suggests. Old growth remnants exist, yes, but they are treated as exceptions, treasures, relics, islands of continuity surrounded by altered land. That alone should disturb us. If true forests were ordinary, we would not need a special moral vocabulary to describe the few that remain. We would not speak of intact forest landscapes as though they were museum pieces. We would not protect single groves like legal witnesses. We would not marvel at massive nurse logs, layered canopies, standing deadwood, and centuries of untouched succession as if we had discovered a lost civilization. Yet that is exactly how modern institutions speak. The pattern repeats because the absence is already embedded in the categories. Look at photographs and timber records from the 19th and early 20th centuries, and another detail emerges. Again and again, the camera catches landscapes in transition, not from wilderness to civilization, but from complexity to simplification. Rail spurs advance into giant timber. River systems are turned into transport corridors. Hillsides are stripped in stages. Log booms stack trunks with diameters that now feel almost mythic in many regions. Then come the replanted rows, the even spacing, the manageable ages, the industrial logic. A modern visitor sees green and assumes continuity. The record shows replacement. And the replacement has a visual grammar of its own. Uniform height, single-species dominance, reduced understory, easier access, cleaner floor, fewer giants. It is not that nothing grew back. Plenty did. It is that what grew back often belongs to administration before it belongs to deep ecology. There is also a physical test hiding in plain sight. Walk through a true old forest, and it does not behave like a tree field. It is vertically layered. Moisture lingers. Sound changes. Light is rationed. The floor is full of rot, fungus, collapse, insects, cavities, broken crowns, nurse logs, and long deadwood cycles feeding new life. The soil is not simply dirt under trees. It is an archive. Remove the old canopy, and you do not merely lose trunks. You lose time stored as structure. Most modern wooded places feel younger because, in ecological terms, they are younger. They are shallower systems. Even where the trees are tall, the continuity is often not. That is the contradiction at the center of the story. We think in silhouettes. Ecology works in layers, and many of those layers are gone. So why is this not discussed more plainly? Why do public narratives so often blur the difference between a living forest and a managed tree cover? The most likely answer is not a grand conspiracy. It is inertia. Bureaucracies need definitions that can be measured quickly across nations and years. Economies need a word that permits timber, offsets, restoration credits, and positive reporting to coexist. Governments prefer recoverable metrics. Satellites see canopy more easily than fungal networks, age mosaics, hydrological complexity, or ecological memory. Classification rewards what can be counted. Forest becomes an administrative surface. That is why omission can feel deliberate even when it is mostly systemic. The simplification is profitable, portable, and polite. It allows loss to be translated into percentages without forcing the deeper admission that the thing itself may no longer exist at meaningful scale. And once you see that, old myths about primeval woods stop sounding like exaggeration and start reading like damaged memory. Across Europe, Asia, the Americas, and elsewhere, cultural memory preserves forests as places of depth, danger, scale, and near-limitless interior. Not parks. Not recreational corridors. Interiors. Places where distance vanished, where canopies darkened noon, where trees were landmarks rather than background. Some of that is folklore, of course. But folklore often survives because it condenses physical truth after measurement fails. The record shows shrinking, clearing, draining, dividing, and managing on a civilization-wide scale. The stories show the psychological afterimage of what that process erased. Put the two together and the theory sharpens. Modern humanity may have inherited the map of forests, the legal categories of forests, and the nostalgia of forests, while losing the actual physical phenomenon almost everywhere. That does not mean the world is treeless. It means the scale of loss has been softened by the vocabulary of continuity. A stand of young trunks becomes a forest. A plantation becomes a forest. A recovering cut block becomes a forest. A fragmented corridor becomes a forest. Each label is defensible in one narrow sense, and misleading in the broader one that matters. Because the ordinary person hears the word and imagines age, depth, interior climate, biological abundance, and self-directed time. Institutions often mean something far thinner. That is why the title sounds absurd until you translate it. There were no true forests on Earth, not in the world most of us have personally seen. What we are looking at, in too many places, are diminished survivors, juvenile replicas, and managed bushes measured kindly. In the end, the most unsettling possibility is not that someone hid the forests. It is that the disappearance was so complete, and the replacement so gradual, that language itself became the hiding place. We kept the noun after we lost the object. We preserved the green image after we erased the structure. We taught children that a cluster of trees is a forest, and in doing so we lowered the threshold of memory. The official explanation tells a story of resilience, and there is truth in that. But resilience is not restoration, and coverage is not continuity. Once that distinction is clear, modern landscapes look different. Not empty, not dead. Smaller, shallower, younger, like the aftermath of something immense. So when you stand in a quiet stand of narrow trunks and feel, Without quite knowing why, that something is missing, you may be responding to a real historical absence rather than a romantic fantasy. There is still life there. There is still beauty there. But there may also be a category error large enough to shape global policy, public imagination, and the way civilization remembers the living world. The real question is not whether the theory sounds strange, but whether anyone with the tools to verify it has seriously looked.